Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrible Home Care. We thank you so much for joining us, however you may be joining us, and we are always glad to communicate with our friends East and West. Very glad to welcome to the program David Naquin, Director of Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness for St. Mary Parish. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We appreciate it, Mr. David. And listen, I will tell you, I've got family over in Morgan City. It's a really big deal to me. I care a great deal about them. And I know that you are always kind of looking after all of the people and the residents of St. Mary. So thank you for what you do.
We certainly try our best. We may not get there every time, but I guarantee you we'll try every time. And we've been very successful. The people in St. Mary have been very cooperative with us and helped us where we can, you know.
Well, and you know, this is the first week of hurricane season, and I don't think any of us can think about or talk about this hurricane season without thinking about last. And so let's talk a little bit about Ida, because, you know, St. Mary wasn't talked about very much, or a little bit to the west of the storm, but y'all had some impacts over in St. Mary.
It really wasn't bad at all. In fact, that's what prompted, Earl to call and ask us to try to open up some shelters to get their people back pretty close. And, other than the fact that I know for a fact, if the roles were reversed, Earl would do the same for us. There's no question in my mind.
Right.
That's not what did it, but certainly that was a factor involved. And as we grew, we wound up opening 5 shelters when it was all said and done, just to try to get the people that. And it wasn't just Terrebonne. It was Saint Bernard, Plaquemine, a few in Assumption. We tried to get them as close to home as we possibly could because. Sure. Obviously the shelters are so far removed. Certainly for Earl's case, it was up in Monroe, West Monroe area, somewhere up there. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's Monroe. But anyway, yes, certainly was able to provide that to get them a little bit closer to home and a little bit. And look, the people were very appreciative. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but certainly most of them.
Right?
Yeah,
right. So. Yeah, as a general theme. But that's a really big deal. You bring up the importance of how important it is to work with parishes next to each other and being right next to each other. It's a really big deal for us to make sure that we can kind of rely on each other, and it's an excellent option.
Well, I mean, I was sheriff for 16 years in St. Mary, and really got to know the Homeland Security side in the last 6 years or so, 5 years, and realized that a lot of times the East-West movement of people is a little bit better than North and South. But it's not always available to do that. But certainly in Ida's case, the line of destruction was so fine. I mean, Gibson, and then everything to the west was fine, and that was us. And it was certainly learned when everybody here was coming to get bread, water, and gasoline in St. Mary Parish. It got to be really
a lot of time in St. Mary.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
But we learned something about electricity being out. And because that was one of those things, I think electricity was out for about as long in St. Mary as it was in some of our areas immediately.
4 or 5 days. Right. Yeah, 4 or 5 days across the board, pretty much.
But we learned something about electricity being out, right?
It was very. We found a lot of generators going on out there, I can tell you.
Right.
I have finally purchased one for my house.
Myself.
So I had to. Yeah, just had to do it.
Right.
And certainly the crews did a great job, but it was just such an enormous. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we found out that the utility poles was more. We lost more for that than any other hurricane, any other storm ever, and that was an amazing number. Didn't realize that we had as many as we had, I guess, but that was certainly one of the big issues that our electric companies faced.
Right. One of the things for me being in healthcare, I know the issues that come up for some people. We always recommend for people to get more medication. We always recommend for them to get water and food and those things. But sometimes things like electricity and oxygen, we can't plan far ahead of time.
Yeah, I tell you, I was really impressed this year. Last year, the Department of Health called us and said, look, if you don't have electricity, the people that are at home, homebound, can't plug in oxygen concentrators to regenerate their bottles. So they brought us bottles. We used our fire departments. In fact, your cousin or whatever,
Uncle
your
Joe,
uncle in Morgan City, at the Morgan City Fire Department, was one of the instrumental in allowing us to store them there. We got the word out, and if someone needed an oxygen exchange, we just exchanged bottles. I think they re-upped it twice, but one other time, but certainly realized how important that was, and that was something that I never really had full control over, but certainly realized that after Hurricane Ida that, and we already have it in place. If it ever happens again, we're gonna do the same thing.
And I think a number of people have generators that maybe they didn't have before, but being able to keep oxygen for those who are on oxygen, either at night, which is called PRN, or all day, you need to have your oxygen.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely
And the way
necessary.
the storm progressed, 2 days out, it was a tropical storm. So we really didn't have time to do any major evacuation, and people got stuck at their homes. And we realized that they were in a bind. They really were. We tried to take care of them as best we can, but the oxygen bottle exchange program that Department of Health here locally came up with was absolutely well worth it. And certainly we were glad we were part of it. And our fire departments housed them, so it wound up being perfect.
Each hurricane season, I think we all are figuring out and learning, what did we learn? What do we do differently? And how well prepared are we? Let's talk a little bit about where we are with St. Mary Parish.
Yeah, we go through a lot of tabletop exercises every year. I don't think I personally have never been through a tabletop exercise where we lost 3 hospitals during Hurricane Ida. And I'm not talking about just have problems, closed. Building, which meant nurses, docs, patients all had to be relocated, and that was a pretty amazing deal. That we played a small part of that, but certainly the way it was all handled, I thought wound up being in the best interest of everybody. Certainly, but certainly that was not anything that I ever even really put in my mind. Like, that can't happen, huh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it happened. And boy, it was really wild and exciting there for a little while.
So when we got structural damage down in the Foosh, the roof came off. When we got structural damage to Terrebonne General here in this parish, when we got electrical issues and backup generator issues over at Thibodeau, and then we got a roof cave in and issues at Chabert.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, boom, St. Mary Chabert becomes St. Mary Oxnard becomes really important to all of those needing health care. So it's much like this oxygen issue we talked about last segment. There's so many people that really needed help, and we're relying on our neighbors to the west.
Yeah, and look, I think everybody did their part. There's no question. We played a small part. I don't think we played a large part, but that's just how it goes.
Some of us here think you played a large part.
I know.
Really do.
Earl's been real good to us. I mean, he's got ties in St. Mary Parish as well.
That is
his
correct.
Family.
Born and raised in Patterson.
So certainly we joke about it a lot, but if you can't try to make a little bit light of the issue at times, it just gets to you. But certainly, this past season, I found that the thing that disappointed me the most was the communication issue.
Okay.
All first responders, cops, policemen, ambulance, no communication. We lost everything, and this is after the state went through a lot to create the Elwyn system, which is you can pick up a radio in Houma and talk to somebody in Shreveport. That's great. But when they went down, it took everything out with it. It took telephones, it took emails, it took everything. And we were pretty much at a total loss for probably 5 days until we were able to get some semblance of it back together. And of course, what we've done now is the police departments are going back to the old high band system because they still had their radios. And guess what? They're still working. Put a little repeater here and there to try to get to where they could at least get communication going. And of course, now all the hospitals have a ham operator or a ham radio in every hospital. So, which is okay, but you got to have the ham radio on the other side of that coin. You can't just talk to yourself, but certainly they can communicate a little bit better. And I think that's going to help. And that's all going to grow.
Right.
I think knowing that we can't rely completely on the state system like we have been in the past. And look, not laugh, but just commented that Hurricane Andrew, we lost nothing. We didn't even lose the rotary dial telephones during Andrew. And then, but with the fiber optics and everything, it just took a couple of lines to go out, and it shut down South Louisiana pretty bad. And it stayed that way for several days, 5 days probably or better.
Yeah. And again, these are some of the things that we have discussions about, what did or didn't work and what do we need to do differently. And so it's good that we have that backup communications network. Because it wasn't just minor communication; it was all communication.
It was bad. No, it was as bad as I've ever seen it. Yeah, that was probably the worst of everything that that we experienced.
Okay. What do we want the residents and the people of St. Mary Parish to know about this hurricane season and what they need to be ready and prepared for?
You know, they come up every year. This is going to be 20 storms. It's going to be named this. Let me tell you, Hurricane Andrew, August 26th, 1992,
Yep.
an A-name storm in August. Now, last couple of years, we were in the S's and T's by the time it got to August. And we liable to have one this weekend, tropical storm-wise. It's not going to have an impact on Louisiana. All the model guidance pretty much shows it going straight across into Florida, probably as a tropical storm. It's going to probably be a more of a rain event than anything else. But, you know, that's an issue, too. So we tell everybody, man, it's going to be 12, it's going to be 19. It just takes one, and that one could be an Ida,
Yep.
it could be an Andrew, or it could be a Laura.
Right.
So we certainly, I don't put as much stock into the numbers,
Right.
because I know it only takes the one to come get you.
Volume
So,
doesn't matter
no,
as
it
much.
doesn't
when
matter. No, it
it's
doesn't
sometimes it's the quality, and terribly enough,
Right,
the quality
exactly.
of the three you mentioned, Laura, Andrew,
Exactly.
and Ida. And so people just need to be vigilant. They need
Yes.
to pay attention. Where can they go to get more information that you want to get out?
You know, we have a website like
Right.
everybody else. We
Right.
put a lot on it. We try to put as much information out as we possibly can, and then when we have our meetings, I have a whole list of the media group and people that can access it. And it's been pretty successful. We try to stay on top of it as best we can, but I'm certainly we could grow that line as much as possible. But certainly that's how we get our information out.
And we're glad to do it here with HTV.
Yes, y'all
Our
do a great
partners to
job.
the west, we appreciate it. David, thank you for joining us and
Sure.
giving us some updates. Appreciate your time today.
Not a problem. Anytime.
All right. Very good. And again, that's David Naquin with the Department, Director of Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness in St. Mary Parish. All right, guys, don't go anywhere. A lot more Bayou time when we continue.